Welcome back after the break. You're watching DD News, and for more updates on the G20 summit, we're joined in by our correspondent Siddhant Sibal from Hamburg. Siddhant, yesterday we saw participation by the Indian Prime Minister wherein he laid emphasis on the issue of global terror and how terror is emanating from sources of different countries. Let us know more. What reactions have you got in from other countries as well? And also, particularly, let's talk of how media in Germany has talked of and evaluated the G20 meet which was held yesterday.
9 o'clock in Hamburg, and of course newspapers have been talking about the big G20 summit. Let's talk about news from the China Daily, which is also been available here, and it has presented pictures of the world leaders, especially Prime Minister Narendra Modi, on its main page. And the China Daily has specifically focused on the BRICS informal meet which took place yesterday. So picture of Prime Minister Narendra Modi in China Daily featured along with President Xi Jinping, and special focus on the BRICS meet which took place yesterday. But talking about the German print media, well, it has been talking about the protests and of course the big meet, the big bilateral between President Trump and President Putin. So picture of both the leaders and saying the summit of politics and violence because protests have been really rioting around the city. Situation is kind of bad. Frankfurt General has said that both the leaders have be able to achieve a kind of a ceasefire in Syria, in western part of the Syria, and the same picture has been published in most of the German newspaper. This is an important picture. Both the leaders shaking hand and of course talking with each other. And the headline says that in the shadow of violence, the world reorganizes. So pretty much important news coming from the G20 summit about the Syrian ceasefire. And this newspaper, it is a South German newspaper, has picture and says that it's a summit of anger. Remember, this year's summit has seen it's a different summit because still no consensus on the contentious issue of climate change. But what is making more headlines is the protests around the city of Hamburg. A lot of protests. So this picture published in New Deutschland, which is a new newspaper in a sense, just 1 year old. So this newspaper has this water cannons being thrown. And finally, a very big picture of protest swamping the city of Hamburg. You can see this picture of a big picture of masked men in the city. And so the German newspapers focusing on the three T's: Trump, trade, and obviously terror, because last night the first day of the summit saw a joint statement coming from the G20 leaders on the issue of counterterrorism, in which focus was on de-radicalization and also saying that no part of the world should have safe havens for the terrorists.
All right, Siddhant, yes, you tell us that no major consensus has been found on the contentious issues. Let's talk of climate change. But then Trump, trade and terror are the three T's which dominated this year's G20. Now, we also know that apart from the summit level, it is more of the bilaterals that are in focus of the participating countries. We've given a backgrounder to the viewers about the bilaterals which were held by Prime Minister Modi with the leaders of the other countries. So let us know more about these bilaterals and what is to be expected in the day ahead.
Well, the summit seems to be a sideshow for the bilaterals, because bilaterals have hogged most of the limelight, especially the bilaterals between Russia and the US, and coming out with details about that ceasefire that has been agreed on Syria. But Prime Minister Narendra Modi also engaged in a lot of bilaterals. He had two bilaterals yesterday with Japan's Prime Minister and the Prime Minister of Canada, and today he has 8 bilaterals with the leaders from South Korea, Mexico, Italy, and UK and Argentina. These are the countries. But apart from these bilaterals, Prime Minister's schedule is a hectic one. He has to attend also two plenary sessions focusing on a partnership with Africa, women, migration, all these issues, health. For the first time, health is also a major subject on the G20 agenda. So pretty much a hectic day, but only the final communique will tell us was there any consensus on the contentious issue of climate change, and of course free trade, because that is also an issue which is dominating headlines, because we know that protectionism is a concern. Yesterday Prime Minister Narendra Modi spoke at the informal BRICS meet and raised the issue of protectionism creating barriers across the world, and India has been voicing its concerns because it impacts us in India, because a lot of people from India go to Western countries to provide services, and that's a major portion of our service economy. So that's another concern. But by and large, major victory for India when it comes to the issue of terror, because the statement which came yesterday night India time, that statement was hard on countries supporting safe havens of terrorists. Of course, India has been voicing concerns about safe havens in its neighborhood. That, of course, points to the country in our west, that's Pakistan. And there's the same concern from Afghanistan also.
Yes.
So pretty much a major victory on the issue of terror. But the world seems not be able to speak in one voice when it comes to the issue of climate change.
All right, so we'll have to see how long the world takes to merge when we talk of the issue of climate change. But then we also know, Siddhant, that the working session will begin in a short while from now. And Prime Minister Narendra Modi is expected at the second working session today. Let us know more about it.
Well, Prime Minister Narendra Modi will be at the second and the final session of the day, and these two sessions focusing, as I've told you, on women and partnership with Africa. Special focus on Africa this time around in G20. First time Africa being well given its due at the G20 summit, because Africa is the last economic frontier, and India has been engaging with Africa for a long time. And this time around we saw a major summit in 2015, India-Africa Partnership Summit in New Delhi, in which all the African leaders participated. A major African summit. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has been to many African countries and focuses on development, on infrastructure, on people-to-people contact and capacity building. These are the areas in which India has been focusing. We saw the African Development Bank meeting in Gujarat. So India welcoming this step. Before the summit was to start, India's ambassador to Germany had a conversation exclusively to DD News and lauded German presidency for this step, because Africa is the last economic frontier, and its development can expedite the global development and global growth at a time when global growth is heading for a slowdown. So by and large, we can expect some statement coming on these affairs, but the main focus will be on the final communique, because it's still in its stages of negotiation, and it's first time it has happened that it's taking so long. Remember, usually summits are choreographed affairs, but this time around in Germany, it's totally different. Protests, policy laws, and of course change in regime in Washington is making difference. That stability is missing, so that's why it's a fluid situation, and we all will be waiting for the final communique, because it could show the differences countries have, especially on the issue of climate change. And remember, climate change became a major dominating thing only after US withdrew from the Paris Climate Change Summit.
Yes. All right, so negotiations are still in progress, even as we know that the situation there is fluid. Thank you so much, Siddhant, for joining us. We'll come back to you again during the day to get more. So our correspondent, Siddhant, putting into perspective for us how the media there has evaluated the G20 summit, the development